Hello, darling heart, and welcome to the Drink Less, Live Better podcast. This is the podcast that helps you to see that drinking less doesn't need to be stressful, lonely, or boring. I'm your host, Sarah Williamson, and I decided to have a year alcohol-free as a little life experiment, and I haven't looked back. With my experience and training, I now help other women with their alcohol-free or drink-less adventures. I'm here to tell you that you can relax, connect, and have fun without alcohol in your life. Join me here each week to find out how. If you listened to episode 5, you'd have heard me talk about how I cut down my drinking before I went completely alcohol-free. Today, I'd like to tell you a story about how I stopped drinking without it feeling too difficult or miserable. When I first decided to go alcohol-free for a whole year, I thought there'd be blood, sweat and tears. The blood would surely be from the friend I ended up murdering when they mentioned for the 11th squillionth time that I didn't have a problem with alcohol, and the sweat and tears were bound to be mine each time I thought of what lay ahead. But no, none of that came to pass. There was no blood, sweat or tears, and here's the shocker, there was learning, connection and joy instead. As I started to drink less in preparation for going alcohol-free, I read books I didn't know existed before from a genre called Quit Lit. I know, who knew that was a thing? A couple of my favourites were This Naked Mind by Annie Grace and Quit Like a Woman by Holly Whitaker. These books really helped me to see alcohol through new eyes. I felt like I was able to understand why I had drunk like I had and how I could start to change. I also really enjoyed a couple of memoirs, The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober by Catherine Gray and We Are the Luckiest by Laura McCowan. I bought some physical books, but also bought some on Audible and listened while I walked my dog. I then realised that there were podcasts on the subject, and hey, check it out, you're listening to one right now. Good for you, you've got this one sorted. This podcast is short and snappy, meant to be a quick love note to inform, inspire and share my story. But others out there are longer form and interview based. Do go and search for others that float your boat. Have you ever heard of habit tracking apps? I hadn't, but in the early days of my alcohol-free experiment, I used one to keep a track of the number of days I'd been alcohol-free, and I loved seeing the time add up. I always made sure I ticked that I hadn't drunk alcohol first thing in the morning, so that my brain knew that my intention for the day was not to drink. There are loads of specific sober day counting apps. Find one that suits you. Or, if the thought of counting sober days is off-putting for you, then don't. Always do what feels best for you. You don't have to copy anyone else's version of alcohol-free unless it feels good to you. This alcohol-free journey is supposed to feel like a joyful, positive decision and not in any way a punishment. In the early days of not drinking, it did sometimes feel a bit like a full-time job. I put a lot of energy into it. I took the time to read, to listen, to count the days, and also to journal about the thoughts I was having at the time. However, in prioritising the habit of not drinking, it became easier and easier. Because I put it at the forefront of my mind and knew it was important, I kept being able to stack up week after week without a drink. The more distance I put between my last drink and where I am currently, the better I feel in mind, body and soul. The tools I used in the early days gave me ideas of how to talk to my friends about the choices I'd made, gave me hope that I could do what I set out to do, and made me feel less lonely about my choice. Thank you for listening today, and please listen in again next time to hear about how I brought stillness into my sober life in a way I never could have done when I was drinking. You can sign up to my 5-day Drink Less experiment and find out about working with me one-to-one at drinklesslivebetter.com. It would make me happier than a Buddhist monk if you would please subscribe, 5-star review and comment on my podcast on whatever platform you listen. Imagine it like the tasting notes on the finest wine I am never going to drink. Thank you, and P.S. I believe in you.